Hey guys, this is Science Day 6. Today's lesson is much shorter than the last two. There's only 3 multiple choice questions. Each one has a source that we're going to look at, but there's no writing. So, 32 says, use the information and your knowledge of science to answer the question. Devil's Tower is a landform in Wyoming that was buried underground for millions of years. About 5 million years ago, several processes occurred that resulted in Devil's Tower being partly below the ground and partly above the ground, as shown in the figure. So here we can see that this part of Devil's Tower is above the ground, and then everything else is below the ground. And they have like a little line here for you to see too. Okay? It also gives us these different layers. So layer X, it says rocks made of, this layer contains rocks made of silt and salt with fossils of fish. Layer Y has rocks made of salt. And layer Z has rocks made of silt, salt, and sand. Okay, so it gives us a lot of information. The question says, which statement best explains one of the layers of rock around the landform? A, layer Y was once lava. Well, if I look at layer Y, it tells us that the rocks are made of salt. Well, who remembers what kind of rock is made from volcanoes? Well, remember we have igneous rock and there's also basalt. But this rock is just made of salt. So I don't think there's enough evidence to say that layer Y was once lava. So let's look at layer Z. It says layer Z was once an ocean. Well, here, rocks, it says layer Z was made of rocks, made of silt, salt, and sand. There's sand, but we could have sand anywhere. It doesn't necessarily mean that there used to be an ocean there. So again, there's not enough evidence to support that layer Z was an ocean. C, layer Y is younger than layer X. So here's layer Y, here's layer X. It's saying layer Y is younger. Well, remember that the older rocks form where? At the bottom. So layer Z would be the oldest. Then it would be layer Y, and that would put layer X at the youngest. So, is layer Y younger than layer X? No. And lastly, layer X was once under the ocean. So layer X has rocks made of silt and salt with fossils of fish. Well, we know that fish can be found in oceans, and so I believe that there's enough evidence to say that layer X was once under the ocean. All right, let's look at question 33. Use the information in your knowledge of science to answer the question. A teacher models how rainfall causes erosion on hillsides. She places 2 plastic containers on a table. So here's our 2 plastic containers. She builds a hill made of firm clay soil in one container. She then builds a hill made of loose loam soil in the other container. She pours water onto the top of each model hill. The setup is shown in the diagram. So here we have our path of water, which is this white, and this one is the firm soil. And if you look at the bottom, you'll notice that there's not too much erosion going on compared to our second model. So this was made of the loose soil. So the path of water, the reason why it's darker is because it got deeper. And look at the width of this waterway compared to the width of this one. This one became much wider. So you'll notice that there's more what? Erosion. You can also notice at the bottom of this container that the edges are starting to deplete, the depth is not as high as it is over here. So again, you can notice that there's erosion going on at the bottom, especially because if you look at this area here, which used to have a bunch of sand, and this area here, there's a big difference. This one's missing a lot compared to this one. So you know that the loose soil has more what? Erosion. So which statement best explains the difference in erosion patterns? A, loose soil erodes faster because it absorbs more water. Yes, loose soil does erode faster. However, I don't think it's because it absorbs more water. The firm soil is going to absorb the same amount of water. B, firm soil erodes more slowly because water flows into the soil more slowly. Okay, not necessarily, because these two are at the same height. So one's not steeper than the other. So the fastness of it is not going to have anything to do with the erosion because they're the same height. C, loose soil erodes faster because the soil particles float on the surface of the water. Well, loose soil is eroding faster, but it's not because the particles are floating on the surface, or it's not because the sediment is floating on the surface. And then D, firm soil erodes more slowly because it is difficult for water to break those soil particles apart. So it's saying that firm soil erodes more slowly because it's difficult for water to break the sediment apart. And we know that erosion is caused when sediment breaks apart. So, using that information, select your correct answer. And then lastly, we've been doing a lot of talk about volcanoes and earthquakes and where they form. And here we're talking about mountain ranges. So it says use the information and your knowledge of science to answer the question. The locations of mountain ranges are shown on the map. So here's our mountain ranges. If you look at our key, all these little half triangles that you see are our mountains. This dotted line that goes across, who knows what that is? That's our equator, which splits the northern hemisphere from the southern hemisphere. All right, so it says, which pattern describes the locations of mountain ranges shown on the map? A, most mountain ranges are found along ocean and continent boundaries. So here's an ocean and continent boundary. There's a lot of mountains. Here's an ocean and continent boundary. Again, a lot of mountains. Ocean and continent boundary. Ocean and continent boundary. Ocean and continent boundary. Ocean and continent boundary. We have some ocean and continent boundaries up here, and we have a little bit of just continent. So would you agree that most mountain ranges are found along ocean and continent boundaries? Yes. B, most mountain ranges are found on islands. Well, we don't really have any islands that I can see that have mountain ranges on it. Here would be like a little island and there's no mountain range on there. So I would not agree with B. C, most mountain ranges are found where two oceans meet. Well, there's no mountain ranges in the oceans, so I would disagree with that. There's no evidence to support it. And D, most mountain ranges are found near the equator. So here's the equator, like I said before, and are most of those mountain ranges formed along the equator? No, so there's not any evidence to support that as well. So make sure whenever you answer these questions, use those sources to help you and my guidance.